one of the things I talk about in the book that I'm writing is there's 3 steps. It's, you know, assess, act, and ask.
Hey guys, welcome back to another awesome episode of Ask Me How I Know. I am so excited. Jennifer and I, we had like, I don't know, an hour-long pre-conversation already because she's so amazing. And I cannot even wait for you to hear her story and to see how her story can help you build your story and expand in 2021. So Jennifer, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
I'm excited to continue the conversation. And normally I always say this, normally I don't do introductions, but and then I end up doing an introduction. No. But can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure.
Who you are, what are you? Let's start there and then I'll unpack it.
Who I am. Who I am today is a newlywed. I've been married 2.5 years
Congratulations.
after being single for 20 years, probably due to my personality mostly, but whatever. We're 2 adults, and I'm a stepmother to 4 other adults, and I'm a grandmother. I'm a real estate investor. I'm a podcaster. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a former corporate salesperson, spent 25 years doing corporate sales, selling for other people, sold $47 million for other people, and had the epiphany like, oh, I could probably make some money for myself here. And that's it. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and I have this podcast called Micro Empires, which is about my story, which is that I lost everything twice. No money, no job, no car, no place to live twice, bankruptcy twice, and was the sole financial supporter of my children. So the second time it happened, I knew I had to rebuild in a way that it couldn't be taken away from me. So in addition to getting a job, I started to build what I call micro empires, which is really, I mean, I believe anything that belongs to you is your empire and you should be proud of it, whether it's your little apartment or your car or whatever it is that you have. If it belongs to you, you should see value in that. And so I was able, once I kind of got my credit straight and everything else, within 4 years, I created $1.4 million of income producing investments. And I did that with a W-2 and some grit and some knowledge. And what I realized in that time was that there were all of these tools that I had at my fingertips that I could use to help me rebuild and to build wealth without being wealthy. And to me, that had been a secret. And I wanted to just create a repository, which is what the podcast is really, is a repository of all of that information, my story, but more importantly, the people that I've met along the way who show like these little steps that you can take to start to build financial independence and security.
There is so much there. So a lot of times, we can isolate and focus on one single niche. Like, I mean, this podcast originated because of multifamily investing, and it's become adapted over its life of almost 1 year to include those. Like, these are the stories that you need to be able to borrow. I'll back that up, like borrowing from other industries. And like with your background, as you rebuilt, were you able to just kind of borrow and piecemeal together the different experiences you have? Or what is it that allowed you to realize like, oh, I could draw from this and this, and I can take these daily actions? Like,
Yeah. A lot of it started with the second time around. I just was like, well, let me back up a little bit. My financial mistakes were all relational. And I don't think that actually matters, but apparently it matters a lot because I get a lot of feedback from listeners, et cetera. So my mistakes weren't that I started a business and it failed, or I didn't pay my mortgage, or that I liked my Range Rover and expensive purses. I've never been that kind of a person. My mistakes came because I turned my financial well-being over to someone else. And I did that twice. The first time was with my ex-husband, who sued me 25 times in 10 years. So I ended up with $500,000 in attorney's fees. That can happen. No surprise, that was in California.
oh, that's no surprise.
Right. And then the second time, I had turned my financial well-being over into the gentleman I was in a long-term relationship with. And so when those ended, I was left penniless, even though I was a corporate executive earning 6 figures. So the reason I share that, and it was a secret. I kept that a secret because I was ashamed. And the fact that I had been in Chapter 13 bankruptcy twice was also a secret. Because, like most Americans in American culture, I was very ashamed of that. But I think that's important. So I knew that I had to build something. So what was it that triggered it? Well, number one, the drive of like, this is never going to happen. I've got to learn this lesson. So I did things on a personal level. One of the things I did when and people think this is outrageous, was I made the decision to be single. for for like 4 years. I said after the breakup, I was like, all right, I'm going to be single for 4 years. People thought that was outrageous. And so when I would meet very nice gentlemen, I would say, I don't date, I'm on sabbatical. And they thought that was radical.
That is
And
fantastic.
yeah, I was like,
It's
I don't date. And it's important. I am going to do an episode about, at least about dating, if not relationships, and get really deep as it pertains to money. But I think it's interesting because during that time, I had other friends, and at that time, I was in my late 30s, early 40s, and oh, my other friends were like, "Well, why is there not a man?" Like there was this constant pursuit of a man.
like you need to have this. You're not complete. How can you be
Right.
living your life?
Exactly. And wouldn't you want to? And of course I
Yes,
did.
right.
Of course I did. Of course I wanted to find, the soulmate or the best friend or whatever, but I needed to spend the time figuring out the common denominator in all that shit that happened all those years was me. So I needed to figure out the role that I played. So I
That's so
spent that time.
powerful. Do you
Yes.
realize, I mean, so often, and I think that this is really particular in like American culture, Western culture, of that, like, I can blame everyone else. Let me point the finger and let me not deal with my own baggage that I'm bringing to this, or let me
Right.
just try to put it everywhere else but me. That requires so much strength to be able to say, okay, whoa,
Yeah.
what's up with me? What do I need to do?
Right. Right. Am I attracting the wrong people? Am I putting out the wrong message? But really, what is my own feelings about me? So I did a lot of work around that. It's a lot of emotional work. And that's how, in my show, the first question I always ask is about your money culture, because I had to spend a long time learning about my money culture, and what I require, because money is a factor in life, what I require as it pertains to money, which equals security for most people. So I did that. And then in that time, I was laser focused. I had to keep, I know you have tips. I listened to your show the other day about the morning routines, which I think I'm going to write a book called The 11:30 Miracle, because I like the whole 5 a.m. thing. I'm trying, it's not working. So I feel
Yeah,
like there
but you're
needs,
probably a night owl. Like,
I
I
am.
think that you have to realize, like, what's my circadian clock? Like, what's my bio clock, and how do I work my world around that?
Right. But these tips are all great and everything. As I get older and older, I'm like, I can't do it. But one of the things I did was I always kept little notes around the house, and not only post-it notes, but I would write on my window with a dry erase make marker three things, because I'm a believer that you can accomplish three things. So in the morning I get
Mhm.
up and I write down, what three things must I accomplish today if I do nothing else? But then there's three bigger things, right? That I'm setting my mind and my intention towards during a period of time. So I started on the corners of all of my windows. It had home, work, art. Home, work, art on the front door, on the mirrors in the bathroom, on sticky notes. So you come to my house, people were like, what does this mean? Well, I had my home. I had finally purchased a home, and I knew that that would become an asset that would help me turn around my financial world. I had gotten a job and I created a micro empire at my job. I knew that I could become the salesperson of the year, which would make me the highest paid person in my division, which is what I did just by focusing on work. And then art. I had started painting and wanted to turn that into a revenue generating stream, because I always have at least three streams of income. But when my friends would come over, they'd say, "Well, there's no man on that list. Why is there no man on that?" I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. There's no man on that list. I'm on sabbatical. There's no room right now." So that was one thing. And then the second thing I think was to broaden my horizon, join tactical things. I joined a real estate investor group here in Nashville. That was mind blowing, because it's a language that I didn't speak. All the words that you and I now know, 1031 exchanges and syndications and joint ventures and yada, yada, didn't speak that language. So I had to learn. And then other things that weren't so tactical. Like I joined my first mastermind to kind of change my mind shift. And, of course, read the Purple Bible, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I'm
Right.
giving away a copy of this month. But so those were the beginning factors of that change.
That's amazing. I'm like over here jotting down questions because it's so like, I mean, you've listened to a couple episodes. I'm always so curious because that's a conversation piece, right? Is it um should our security be tied up in money? Because
Um,
you're right, most people do. They look at like, okay, look at the bank account, great, everything's good. Let's smile and have a great day. Oh, I look at the bank account. Oh, I feel scared.
Right, right. I think that's why I ultimately came down to understand my own, and it's what I call money culture. And that's what I ask about. So when I interview folks and they say, I have folks I interview who say, I grew up completely poor, and that money culture, how did that make you feel? How did you end up as you left the house as an 18-year-old or whatever? And some people will say, I left terrified. I was always afraid I'd never have enough. Other people grow up completely poor and they realize they leave the house going, well, I wasn't afraid of anything because I knew we could survive anything. But why I think it's important is to understand your own relationship with money. So my money culture was one of fear, and that doesn't mean anything bad about my parents. They were very, very conservative. They taught me really good lessons about money. But that's still true in the pit of my belly, in the deep down, which is the only place that really matters. Um, but I now have empowered myself that I dictate, where I go, and I have complete control over my own financial well-being. But especially in my relationship with my husband, he has to understand, like, if we can't live on the edge, we can't
Mhm.
live above our means because I will be a crazy person and his life will be miserable.
Right.
So we have to live below our means because that's where I'm comfortable. And he's comfortable with it too. But I have that fear factor. He doesn't necessarily, but he's also at the tippity tippity top of the food chain as a white male who's grown up very privileged, and I'm at the top of the food chain as well as a white female. So I just think it's important to understand, like, if you're married to somebody who their money culture, how they feel at this moment right now, if my self-worth was tied up in I have to drive a luxury car, I need to have the best clothes, because it makes me feel good, it makes me feel whole. That's okay, but you got to know that. None of that matters to me. What matters to me is that when my daughter, who's a single mother living in Idaho, called the other day and her tires were blown and she needed new tires for $800, I could write that check. And there was
Yep.
no, what are we going to do? Can we put it on a credit card? Could we? And I'm not missing a meal because I wrote her that check. That's what matters to me. So that's where so it is my security. It's not my identity though. I think for a lot of people, when they do this work around their money culture and they realize, wow, my self worth is tied up in what I look like to the rest of the world, that's when some soul searching comes in.
That's a really interesting way to look at it as well, because I asked you about security, but then, yes, you're right. Some people, it's like, oh, my security is here. And other people, it is my identity. And
Yep.
Jennifer, I don't think I've ever separated the two of
Funny.
security and identity. That's really fascinating. So, some like basically, some people, listeners could ask themselves that question of like, you know, well, what questions would you recommend them asking? I'm thinking of a million just from what you've said, but you're a pro at this. What are a
So,
couple questions they could ask if they're single and
mhm.
if they're in a relationship or getting into, maybe even before getting into a relationship?
Oh, it's so good that you asked that, and I'm making a note right now, because I'm writing a book, and it's called "You Don't Have to Be Wealthy to Build Wealth," and it'll be available pretty soon because I'm asked these questions all the time, and I'm putting together literally lists like, are you a millennial? Are you just getting out of college? Are you getting married? Those sorts, all of those questions to ask. But I think the real questions just of ourselves, and I will ask you this when you come on my show. So it'll be, what was the money culture in the home that you grew up in? How did that make you feel about money and your sense of self? How did it affect your relationship with money as you headed out into the world and your work ethic? Because most of us, leave our home from our parents who love us for the most part and try to protect us, and we head out into the world. And most of us suffer a very harsh reality slap. Like, what do you mean the credit card is due at the end of the month? Or
What do you mean
adult,
rent is that much?
right? Adulting is hard. And how do people do this? And how did mom and dad do this? Or they've either had their lives paved for them or whatever. What I realized for me was that it wasn't about, because I married into financial chaos, which is another a financial roller coaster, having come from a very, very steady home that was so foreign to me.
Oh, wow. That would
So,
be huge culture shock right
yep.
there.
And I was married to someone who, um, he had been as a child denied the basics, denied food. So he had to eat out every single day, even though we were dirt poor. So on the credit card, 3 meals a day, he's out while I'm at home eating rice. That's a disconnect in money culture. Um, but what I realized was that it wasn't about the amount of money that I needed. It was about having a regular money, which is what gave me peace. But in terms of how to ask questions, the first things I would do is just sort of look at how you grew up and where that left you, and then where did you shift to? And then if you're in a marriage, you can clearly, I'm sure you could tell me right now, like what your husband's money culture. Maybe you can't, and that's important too. I interviewed my husband and we walked through his money culture, but before marrying him, it was very big part, especially a second marriage, especially coming in with our own assets in middle age and we're not having children together.
And coming in after a 4 year after a sabbatical.
Yep. And I had been 20 years single. I mean, I had dated, but I had been 20. So, I was like, because I was waiting for him to find me. Um, but it was a big conversation, and most people don't have that conversation, especially in second marriages. And it was really important because I'm marrying into his former culture of his first marriage as well, because they have children and their expectations, etc. My culture, my children's culture was only my culture because I raised them from the time they were 1 and 3 by myself. But anyway, those are things to consider. Did that answer your
Oh,
question?
that's fantastic.
Okay.
Speaking to that concept, in Brendan Burchard's book, High Performance Habits, he references how how we're affected by the people around us, right? We already know that. We accept that, but what the stats on how your friends actually affect you, that was mind-boggling to me. And so that makes sense, but I've never consciously thought of that. Like, okay, well,
Right.
here he is in his previous, and then her even like her upbringing and her childhood, what money culture she brought in, what
Mhm.
money culture they created, and then now that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
And
so
I think even couples, I talk to people who've been together for years and years, but they've never had this conversation. And it's really important because my husband understands now very clearly that security is well above. We live in a evolving neighborhood. We live next to a house that we call the hipster hotel. It's a duplex, but there's like 15 people live in it. I love to live in these neighborhoods. This is where I've always invested. Um, we could live we could live somewhere else, but I'm comfortable here. I don't drive a fancy car or whatever, but that doesn't mean, because this is really important. You can do all those other things, but just understand where that need comes from. Because a lot of it is the American dream, which is a lie and is fed to us. And that's why Dave Ramsey has the success that he has, right? Because everybody's kind of keeping up. But once you get through that I'm out of debt thing and you need to build wealth, what you're really building is security, because that's what it gives you. That's the only thing money gives you is time and options, period. Doesn't give you anything else.
That's so true. Okay, now that just you brought in Dave Ramsey, and that's an interesting thing because we had gone through, my husband and I years ago went through a Financial Peace University, and we were actually, well, we considered ourselves debt free, and then we went to his and we're like, apparently we have a mortgage, so we're not debt free.
Right.
Meanwhile, that's a whole nother conversation,
Yep.
right, about the mortgage. But and we just decided on our own, like, well, to us, that's not something that we feel we need to pay off. We're leveraged. That's a good
Right.
investment right there. However, let's just look at the people that they wear their Financial Peace University badge of honor. I'm debt free,
Right.
and but I feel like it leaves right there. instead of the next step. Great, you're debt free. You don't stop there. That's where I feel like someone like you comes in. It's like, okay, here's how to build wealth.
Right.
But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that I've never done Dave Ramsey. I know lots of people who have, and I think it's a very clearly a very useful tool. I think more than anything, it just helps people grasp the reality. One of the things I talk about in the book that I'm writing is there's 3 steps. It's, you know, assess, act, and ask. So the assess part is the Dave Ramsey. Like there are many people. This is very common. People earning lots of money who don't open their bills, who can't tell me what their monthly nut is. How much does it take just to survive? And I always have 3 numbers in my head: my survival number, my survive and breathe number, and then my thrive number. And those numbers really haven't changed because I've always known, like, if I lost, because that's the fear part of me, like, what do I need to survive? But I think you're absolutely right. Dave Ramsey, and that's his goal, and it's working out well. But you and I both know, especially from a investor perspective, that there is good debt, right? There's debt that's
Very good debt.
very good debt. Our homes, arguably, may not be that good debt, but there's other debt that's really good, just like compound interest, good compounding interest, bad compounding interest. You want to be on the good side. But yeah, it definitely leaves that. I can't imagine advising somebody who just dug themselves out of debt to pay off their mortgage. And for the love of God, especially now with the interest rates that we have, like, just keep paying that bill, keep paying that
Right.
bill, and take that. You, in our last phone call that we had, you were like, money's on sale right now, or taxes
Right.
are. So you had some great
It was
quote that I wrote
taxes.
down.
Taxes are on sale right now.
Right.
Pay
So
the
I'm
taxes now. I'll put that little plug in there right now. Pay the taxes now, and use your Roth if you're using a Roth. Taxes are on sale.
taxes are on sale, and that's very wise. But what that is, and I think that's where I come in, it's money manipulation. So it's, where are
Yeah.
you right now? You've paid off your debt, you've got your house, and you're brand new to all of this. And I just spoke to a man yesterday who is a smart young man having his first baby, got let go from his third startup because it went under, but has made great investments, has an old 401k, thinking about getting into real estate. What should he do? And I was like, dude, once we lined up all of the stuff that he had, I'm like, you could do all of this and be successful, or you could start really small. That's why I call it micro empires. You don't have to take your entire $450,000 of, worth that you have from the properties that you own, liquidate it and put it into something else. You can start with 50K and you can get your toe wet, and you could start to build a network of people that you trust. And that's what I would say to do. So I think where Ramsey leaves off is not only that all debt is bad, that is wrong. It's all wrong. Um, but then how do you build, step by step, little by little? And in our world of the folks that we talk to every day, Julie, people are, it can be really intimidating. They're like, "Oh, I own 150 doors in, Memphis, Tennessee. I
But I
own
have no cash flow.
but
Sorry.
I have no cash flow." But, or even with me, my story, yes, I created $1.4 million of income producing assets. There's a reason I write it that way. They are I sold them. They are income producing assets. I had $800,000 in mortgages, but it didn't matter because the mortgages were being paid by other people and I was cash flowing like crazy. The reason I sold them 30 days before COVID was because they were all short-term rental. And thank you, God, that I sold them. That industry will be fine. It'll all come back. But it was a good decision to let them go at that time.
That's yeah, your timing on that was impeccable. Oh my
And as a person who has a money culture of fear, I would have been in a fetal position because my carrying costs were $7,000 a month. And I would have 3 months in, I mean, I wouldn't have been destitute, but I I wouldn't be sleeping. I'd be chewing my own arm off. I wouldn't know what to do.
yeah,
It would be
yeah,
terrible.
definitely. Somebody wants to get started. There are two conversations I want to have before we wrap up, and because I know that to me they're both important. I think they're both important for both of us. But let's speak to the person that says, "Well, okay, I want to start building this micro empire. Like, what's my first step? I only have, $5,000. Like, can I even get started with that?
And the answer is yes, but I think, and I do talk to a lot of folks, and I was this way too. I was like, okay, I got it. I'm ready. Where do I go? But they haven't taken the time to kind of educate themselves. So the first thing I would say, and this is not like, I don't, it's not a real estate podcast that I have, and it's not even, I am not a real estate expert, but I will say Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I mean, you got to read that book because everybody talks about it and you should understand it. And the concepts and the way it opens your mind is really important. And then I think really getting started, the second part is to surround yourself with a new tribe
Oh,
because,
powerful.
you know, putting myself in with that real estate investors group and seeing people, all walks of life, every color, every age, who were investors of some kind. And when I first showed up at the meeting, they would say to me, well, do you buy and hold? Are you a flipper? Are you in multifamily? Or I was like, I don't know what those,
I but what?
yeah, what are any of those words? And so I'm going to show you this for anybody who's watching this video. The next time I went back to that meeting, had these cards made up, and all they are my initials on the front. And on the back, I believe in making true statements that may not necessarily be linked. On the back, it says my name, my phone number, and investor, entrepreneur, and artist. Because I'm like, all those things are true,
Yep.
but I actually don't have any idea what I'm doing. But I did that because I needed to believe in myself and to walk the walk, but also to be humble enough to say, what's a multifamily? What do you mean when you say that? You know,
Right.
why would I buy a four? What do you mean? How does that qualify under the, there's all kinds of secrets. And so I would get
So
real,
many.
yeah. So step one is to really get really comfortable and then decide where you are comfortable. So when I first started out, I met a lot of people who were working, driving around the hood, buying houses, fixing them up. And I learned quickly, I'm never going to do that because I'm not very handy. I don't really want to do any of that. I don't know any construction guys who can help me with that. So the properties that I bought were new properties, but I was one of the first people in Nashville, Tennessee to get into short-term rental. And yeah, it was cash flowing like crazy. So I bought brand new properties that were beautiful and I moved into them and I furnished them at a nth of the price it should take to furnish a house because I lived in them. And then I managed them for a period of time till they were up and running. And then I turned them over and I did it again. And I did it 3 times. And I realized I could get a house for 3% down. This was where my niche. But had I not spent the time figuring that out, which was about a year, I probably would have tried to do a flip with somebody because I was watching HGTV. You know,
Right.
that is so not for me. So not for me.
I won't lie. I mean, I've done I've done, I mean, I know how to do hardwood floors, like legit hardwood floors. And I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah,
Thanks. I'll let
exactly.
somebody else do all that work. So, but
Exactly.
that's interesting because that came, you also, I'm assuming that you also had changed your tribe
Oh
or
yeah,
adopted some other, networks and tribes then, right?
yes. Yep. Yep. So the real estate investors was the first, kind of surrounding myself with this mindset of people. One of my favorite humans on the planet is a gentleman by the name of Philip Reichwalder, who used to lead this group, totally corny, called Deals, Deals, Deals.
I
And
love it.
we would get together on Tuesdays nights, and 60 of us would pack into a room back when we could all get together. And he was leading this group and he was amazing. And I asked him to just kind of take me under his wing, and he did. But he spent 2 years just being in that group and never investing. And he said, I had an apartment and he calls it, and a Toyota ish. That's what he said. That's all I had to my name, a Toyota ish. He had been like a caver. He had never money. And he stood there for 2 years watching people. And he finally took the leap and made his first investment in what he was comfortable with. And he ended up, I mean, I think in 1 year he had 50 doors. But Philip was driving, he took me with him. It's one of my favorite memories ever, into some of the roughest neighborhoods, and knocked on the doors and was talking with people. And it was those relationships. That's where he was comfortable. But yes, him and other people. And then my tribe expanded more as I read podcasts. Honestly, your tribe can change overnight.
Yeah.
I've reprogrammed my brain to completely learn audibly. And every day I probably consume at least 5 or 6 hours of content audibly. And I highly recommend that because that will change you like that.
I agree with you. Listening to podcasts shifted my thinking. It was that education component. I could get it driving to and from work, and where I live, I have to drive a distance to most places because I'm rural. So, it's like we were already like audiobook addicts, but then it was, oh, look at this podcast content that is just endless streams of amazingness and so much quality content available. And I will speak to that tribe component is that if you need to, and listeners who've heard this before or who have been listening, they will know I've said this before, and that is adopt some people. It doesn't into your tribe. Like you can start with just one person. But I will tell you, I have a book club right now, a virtual book club that spans the globe. And it's extraordinary. I have a friend that is not in our investing world that, I said, I think you should join this, consider this. And she did. And it's amazing how I can see the ripple effect on her. And I get this message like, all these people are traveling and all these people are, talking about their networks. And it's this whole other language. And, I think you would agree. Once you get a taste of that Kool-Aid
Yep.
of, oh, wait, there's something else out here outside of my normal, like step out of whatever your normal is, disrupt it immediately and step out
Yes.
of your comfort zone and find new people. It doesn't mean the people in your life are bad or anything like that, but you should always be expanding and finding those new people because everyone leaves a fingerprint on you. And
Right.
usually, I'm going to say, I'm optimistic. Usually that fingerprint is good. And even if they're, a snarky person or something, it's going to impact you and remind you, I'm not going to choose to be like that.
Right. Right. And walk, don't run in that. I mean, sorry, run, don't walk in that direction. It's incredible. And I think, two things. When I first left the corporate world and I was like, I'm going to do this podcast and the properties were going really well. And that's a whole story too. I had a friend that I've known for a long time that was like, why would you ever do that when you can just have a job? Because I mean, I always had 6-figure jobs, despite my financial hardships. And I was like, okay, so you don't get it. He's not out of the tribe. He's a loving, dear friend of mine. His mindset's just different than mine. And even yesterday, this gentleman who called me, who I've known for a few years, he said, well, okay, thanks for all the help. And this is really like blew his mind because he hadn't heard of any of these opportunities and he knew he had to get back there and sort of educate himself. He goes, but let me ask you this. Do you miss, the corporate world, the corporate job? you know, I,
Oh.
I was laughing so hard. I was like, no, honey, no, I don't miss anything. And if, knock on wood, hopefully I'll continue to have successes, but there's always a job and I'm
Yeah.
not afraid to work hard. That's another thing that money culture has taught me. Like, I'm not afraid. I know how to work hard. I can work hard for myself or hard for someone else. I get paid a lot more if I work hard for myself.
There's so much satisfaction I find in working for myself. And I don't know if that's just because of how I'm wired as a person, where I have so much hustle in me and determination. And, I just love seeing successes. And I don't consider the little side steps in life failures. I just can go, oh, okay, that's what not to do. Let's ask me how I know that one. We're not going that
Right.
right. And you have lots, I mean, you've shared a lot. You're ask me how I know. And it's like, okay, well, I just want to do that. We're not derailed. We're just
Yeah.
right back on the path.
And I do want to say another thing, and I think this is really important about this gentleman who called me yesterday. So he, again, I can't tell you how old he is, having his first baby, probably has a home that he lives in that's a mortgage. He's been earning a corporate salary, has a couple of investment properties, has some old 401ks, et cetera. And that's why I said, now's a great time for you to get educated, surround yourself. Here are some resources, go, and take the time. And if you need to you can always get a corporate job. But I told him this too. I said, if you called me and you said, I've lost the job, we have the house, the mortgage is really high, we don't have any other source of income, my wife's job doesn't pay insurance, I would advise that you go get a W-2. There is nothing wrong with a day job, nothing. And there's nothing wrong with a boring day job, especially if you want to build your empire on the side. So I really don't like to profess that entrepreneurship is the only way to go. And not everybody loves it. I have a very dear friend who I invested with, and he's on the show. His show actually comes out next week, and he's an incredible investor. He's also got a full 9 to 5 that he loves, and he's never going to leave. And he travels the world, and he's a police officer. I mean, there isn't anything he doesn't do. Um, but he's never leaving that job, and he does not need the money. He doesn't need any of the money. So there's nothing wrong with having a job.
Definitely not. And I will say on the entrepreneurial side, it's hard work and hustle. I
Yeah.
worked hard when I was working my W-2 as an elementary school teacher.
Mhm.
There was a lot of, I mean, that was demanding on a lot of different levels. And I kind of joke, because I've bumped into some people that I used to, work with, and they'll be like, oh, in their mind, probably think that I'm just taking it all easy and everything. It's like, no, I would still wake up at dark 30, and I still have my routine, because I'm working harder than I was as a teacher, because that's what it takes when you believe in something and you want to push it up to the high levels. So it's definitely not for everybody, because it's demanding.
It's much more demanding. The W-2 job was time consuming, but wasn't rocket science. But, this stuff, and even like just with the podcast, like you're just making it up as you're going along. Like I somehow thought there would be a machine I could jump on that would teach me. And there's no machine. You just got to figure it out. But it's also why I'm attracted to things that are like the Wild West, which podcasting is, investing is like. That's why I like short-term rental early on, before the whole world knew about it. But yeah, it's a hustle. It
It,
stretches me every day.
I love it. The last topic, and in my estimation, in my opinion, this is like the most powerful. And I wanted to save it to the end, because I wanted to, at least just not feel like hurried to move along. And I know we do have time we need to be aware of, but before we started our conversation, before I started recording and everything, we were having this really powerful conversation about money, about how easy it is for certain people to go to the bank and get a loan, and to manage their money, or to be a corporate executive and make six figures and rise in the corporate scheme of things. And it led to really, we were talking about this other mission that you have that I really believe in, and that is the mission to help women and people of color,
Mhm,
also gain these micro empires.
mhm. Yeah. So if 2020, oh my God, 2020 has taught me so much. So I've always been a person, and look, for those of you who are listening to this and can't see me, I'm a redhead with blue eyes and pale freckled skin. So, and as a dear friend of mine who's Black said to me, if I looked at your Facebook, I would just think you were a Karen, which I get. And, and I've had my entire life. So my life, I have an episode called inclusion, diversity and inclusion. And I recorded it right after the murder of George Floyd. And the reason I did that was I was like, well, what can I add to, if anything, which I didn't know I could add anything at all. Um, but the episode was really about, hey, don't be a racist, because that's obvious. But it was, I want to just tell you my story, my life, and about how my relationships that have been with all walks of life, people of color throughout my life, have made my life better. They have benefited me exponentially. And so I go through a different set of stories. I was already well into recording the episodes and had been. And as I look back on 2020, probably over half of my guests are African American. That was not because I was like, oh, I need to get some Black folks on my show. It's because I meet all these incredible human beings. And after George Floyd, the conversations have deepened. One of the most heartbreaking things for me is that I can think of two women off the top of my head. One, my friend Lisa, who I've known for 15, 16 years, and we're good friends. We met when I first got here, and she's a dear friend. And I consider her family, like a sister. And I know she considers me a close friend. We've had good times and bad times. After George Floyd, what I learned was there were things that she wasn't even comfortable telling me about because I'm white. And I can't blame her. But learning that there's this whole, not learning, it's not like I didn't know racism existed. It's the microaggressions, it's the day to day, it's every time you walk out the door. So I am making it my mission, and I really, I hope someday to be in the most powerful position so that I'm able to do this. But I'm encouraging other people, because what is the most important thing that we can do as an ally is to offer a hand, to walk side by side with people who are being oppressed and discriminated against. So I ultimately I am already working with investors, I'm working with banks, but I'm making it my purpose that I'm only going to work with people who are going to be committed to uh, that, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm blanking on the word. I don't know.
And I'm blanking. You and I are pretty good with our words, I think, too. How
I know. We'll have to edit
because
this out.
it's a mission.
Mission.
That's their mission.
That mission as well. And when I say that, because I can hear people clinching up when they hear that, like, oh, only if it's a Black Lives Matter or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. I called up one of our banks here in Nashville, Tennessee. The vice president is a woman. I had a long conversation with her, and I said, you do know that only 3% of all commercial loans are ever given to women or people of color. And if it's a woman
3%. Hold on. I just really want 3%, 3% to women and people of color.
yep,
97%.
yep. And that is a universal truth. So if you and I want to start a business, now you and I have some assets and whatever, but if we wanted to start a business several years ago when we didn't, and we went in and we wanted a loan, and just for the fact that we're female, or if you're a person of color, you have 97% chance of getting a no. And if you're a woman of color, I mean, knock it down to maybe 1%, maybe, I don't even know, or 0.000, I don't know. So, and then I had another example of that last night in a call that I was on, and a gentleman that I've known now for 10 months made a comment, African American. He went into a bank to open up a new account. He sat down with the gentleman and said, as he's opening the account, I'm really interested in getting a line of credit at some point at like $50,000. And the guy said to him, oh, well, we're going to need to establish a relationship for a couple of years. And you and I had the exact same face. Like, on what planet would someone, because nobody's ever said that to us, because it doesn't happen to us. So I want to establish relationships, and I want to, I'm going to curse here, but
You're fine.
I think it's relevant. There's a social consequence to being an asshole. That's one of the biggest things that I've always said. And that applies across the board. We have to hold each other accountable. That does not mean that, you have to, you must give X amount of loans to people who are Black. That's not how it works. But for God's sake, that gentleman should never have heard that story, that statement. And if that banker had said that to me, I'd be like, peace out, I'm leaving. I'm leaving, because I know about bank shopping, and I know I can go from one bank to another, to another, to another. This is the reality in the Black world in our country. There's all kinds of statistics around appraisals of Black-owned homes that are appalling. Very powerful. I'm going to name Tiffany Aliche. She is called the Budgetnista. She's amazing. She's been on the Today Show. She's been on all over television, everything. She's amazing. On her podcast called Brown Ambition, she talks about when she puts her house on the market, she has her white friend come over to meet the appraiser, and they put away all their family photos, and for good reason. And there are statistics behind that. I went to look at a house recently here in Nashville, Tennessee, that had been on the market forever. And I'm like, God, this is a really amazing house at a great price. I wonder why. And I looked around, and there weren't any photos, and there were just a few pieces of art. And I went, it's a Black family. And I opened a cabinet, and there were all of their photos piled up. That's the reality we live in every day. I can't fix it, but I can cause a ripple effect. And I do want to work with people who are willing to say, I'm never going to treat Gerald when he walks into my bank that way. I'm going to say, Gerald, oh, you want a line of credit? Great. Here's the process. Let's get started.
Yep.
What's wrong with Gerald? What's wrong with Gerald's money? Nothing. But I think we need to hold that accountability. So, yes, I have people of all walks of life and color, but I really think it's incumbent upon us as white folks in this world, in our country specifically, and to bring people alongside of us. But I'm going to be honest, I have benefited so much. The people who do all of my editing Streamline podcast, founded by an African American man. I mean, I can't tell you how much I have benefited selfishly. And to be fair, not earned. Like I didn't earn that. So it is really important to me. And I'm hoping that bigger and more powerful. I would love to see Dave Ramsey say things like, I'm really going to push for, I want to see organizations giving more loans to African Americans and females or whatever, of course he doesn't believe in debt, but you know what
Right.
I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. No, I get the heart of it. Isn't he
Wait,
down there? He's down in your neck of the woods.
oh
He's,
yeah.
yeah. I think you
And
need
he
to
held,
schedule an appointment.
yeah, he held a Christmas party for 800 people. So he's just, yeah, there's not a lot of, hopefully he'll listen to the show and I'm sure he'll call me up right after.
I'm sure he'll listen to this show.
I'm sure you never know.
You never know. Oh my goodness. Jennifer, I love your heart. I love your mission. I love how you've taken, the difficulties that you have encountered in life and have leveraged them, not just to empower yourself and to create, this a thriving life, but I love so much that it doesn't stop with you. It's like, okay, I have figured this out and now you're teaching it and helping other people. And that to me is just, it gives me goosebumps. So I just want to thank you so much for leveraging everything for everyone else outside of yourself.
And thank you. I really appreciate you having me on the show. And I was introduced to you through Yona, I believe, our friend Yona, who's amazing. But you're just a networking rock star and you're a natural teacher in you. That's what Tiffany Aliche, by the way, is a teacher as well. And she saved, I'm going to tell her, I love her and I really want her to be on my show. So someday she'll listen and she will.
She will.
She was making $40,000 in that same year. She saved 40,000. And she's like, let me tell you how. And, she just teaches the nuts and the bolts and it's incredible. So, but like you, she's a teacher and Yona is a teacher. So I just think that's such an incredible skill. And I really admire it. And I love what you're doing. So thank you so much for having me on here because it's hard to get on the Julie Holly Show. Ask me,
it is becoming increasingly difficult and I'm really grateful, to have so many, I feel like every single episode, I'm like, gosh, this is my favorite episode. And I'm just a cheerleader of everyone. I just like, but here's the thing. If you expand, like we were talking about earlier, if you expand your network, if you're open to meeting new people, if more people would do this, they would see our world is not as crazy as as media might lead us to believe. There are so many amazing people on these powerful missions like you, Jennifer, just out there crushing the world, like crushing in the right way, right? Like I have to come up with a new way of expressing that, right?
Right.
But I mean, like you're helping raise people up, and there are wonderful people out there that are doing that. And so the power of expanding your network is also realizing, wow, there are a lot of huge-hearted, super savvy, smart people that are out there, and that is impacting our world as well.
Right. Right. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
So let's give everybody a place. Do you want them to go to your website? Where can they go and connect up with you aside from Micro Empires podcast? And I'll put links in the show notes.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a website. It's micro-empires.com. I have a free ebook on there now that you can, if you choose to download it and you do it if you want to fill out the form online, it comes to me and I'll respond. It's questions about where you are literally right now. And I will respond to each one. Like I spend time with it, but you don't have to do that. You can also just print it off and do it at home and never share it with me. That's okay too. And I'm on all the socials right now on Instagram. Although I don't know when this show will air, but
what's your handle?
My handle, it's Micro Empire is probably the best one, or you can find me under my name, Jennifer Grimson, either one. But I'm giving away this month I'm giving away Rich Dad Poor Dad, but I'm going to do more book giveaways. So I would say follow me on Instagram, but all the other socials as well.
That is fantastic. Thanks again for coming on Ask Me How I Know.
Thank you.
And to all my listeners, you are one decision away from making the change that you want in your life to go find your freedom.
Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of Ask Me How I Know. This episode was brought to you by Three Keys Investments. They are dedicated to helping people like you, you, my awesome listeners, develop passive income and legacy wealth through multifamily investing. Feel free to check out their website, threekeysinvestments.com, to see if there is an offering that will help your portfolio grow and meet all of your needs. If you haven't already rated, reviewed, subscribed, liked, all of those bells and whistles, I would be absolutely honored if you would do that for Ask Me How I Know. Thanks again, and go make it a great day.